Welcome to the Allo.Capital podcast. If you're just joining us, we are doing seasons. In this season, we are summoning Allo.Capital, a new spinout from Gitcoin that is designed to build the capital allocation layer of the next internet. I think there is big upside here. Capital allocation is a multi-trillion-dollar design space with VCs, governments, NGOs, and DAOs all have to allocate capital to survive and thrive, but it is also a place that we can start small. Every time you spend money, you are allocating capital. We are threading a through line, partnering with builders, researchers, and funders to figure out what on-chain post-AI capital allocation will look like and building it on-chain. If you want to learn more, you can visit our website at Allo.Capital, where you can download the Allo books for free, play with some of our dApps, join the Telegram, or participate in the DAO. Alrighty, today I have a presentation on on-chain BFFs, on-chain bioregional finance for you. This is a presentation that myself and Benjamin Life, who is one of my co-conspirators at Allo.Capital, gave at the Bioregional Finance Summit in Cascadia in Seattle, Washington, a month ago. Bioregional finance is a place-based regenerative capital allocation that funds projects with ecological and cultural needs of the specific natural regions. It supports local resilience, ecosystem health, and community empowerment. So bioregions are basically this idea that if you're coupled in a natural environment with other organisms, then you're in a bioregion together. So a really effective way of organizing the world, if you want to think about how nature would organize the world instead of how states have organized the world, is to look at the bioregions that people are in together with animals and nature, and to think about their incentives to make sure that those bioregions are healthy, are coupled with other people in the bioregion. And that's where BFFs come in. Bioregional finance facilities are funding structures like community banks, DAO treasuries, and public-private funds that direct capital towards regenerative efforts within a bioregion. Benjamin Life and I gave a presentation about on-chain BFFs, on-chain bioregional finance funding structures at BioFi Summit, and we're hopefully going to cook up some bioregional finance stuff in the next Gitcoin round. So excited to see where that goes. If you're listening on audio, you might want to switch to the YouTube channel, Allo.Capital YouTube. Some of the slides the visuals are very, very helpful. So recommend watching this one on video. I think you're going to enjoy. All right, everyone. How's it going? Really good. Thank you for asking. Myself and Benjamin Life are here representing Allo.Capital, and we want to talk about on-chain bioregional financing facilities. So in what way can the Internet of Money and crypto be in service of bioregional finance? And we've prepared a short talk to talk about the better parts of crypto and what we think that we could do to support bioregional finance with that technology. So we represent Allo.Capital. Our mission is to fund what matters. We are a spinout from the Gitcoin ecosystem, where we funded about $70 million worth of open source software. And now we're looking for new ways to help other social movements reach their strategic objectives by using crypto, by using AI, by using modern day technology. And we've been just basically going really deep on research in this design space of how can crypto be in service of everyday communities and bottoms up social movements. And let's see. So I think that what we're really excited about here is the moment of opportunity that we see where the internet could change how we move money and value around society. I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s when the internet, through the ability to take information packets and distribute them across the computer network, changed everything in society that relies on information. Social media, politics, entertainment, all were rewritten in the last 30 years by the internet. And we see a very clear analog with the Internet of Money, in that we think that we can now change how we move money and value around through tokenization, and everything that relies on value transfer in society could therefore be changed by the Internet of Money. And so insurance, jobs, public goods funding, how we fund bioregional finance, we're really excited about the opportunities to bring crypto and AI and make those things in service of bioregional financing. And I think that this is not only a big moment of opportunity for our generation, but it's also a big moment of urgency for our generation. We see a time of institutional collapse, uh, the support for institutions at an all-time low. We think that new technologies can enable hyperlocal economies, and that Web3 and crypto actually needs this real world impact to legitimize itself. Thank you. I'm going to pass it off to Benjamin, who's going to take us through another couple slides.
Yeah, and I wanted to start out by trying to ground a little bit of what we're talking about in crypto and Web3, and um, really draw some parallels between the bioregional movement and decentralized technologies, because I think there's a lot of similarities. Um, Bioregions are the original distributed network. They're open-ended and participatory. They're based on the interactions between all of the different species and water and the microbiology in the soil. All of those things are interacting in a dynamic and participatory way. There's no centralized control or leadership. It's all about the interactions between the parts. And we can design blockchain systems that have the same principle. They're participatory. They are self-governed. And bioregions are also pluralistic and polycentric. One of the big challenges that we have thinking bioregionally is that we're used to hard edges, and bioregions have ecotones, there's gradients. And so having systems that are able to acknowledge that plurality, to say, I'm actually part of a liminal edge, but where multiple bioregions intersect. How can my identity system not just refer to, oh, I'm a citizen of this nation state or that nation state, but my identity is actually depends on the context in which we're interacting. And so we can actually have identity systems that reflect that kind of polycentricity, many centers depending on context. Bioregions are also modular and interoperable, in that there are component parts that are all interacting with each other, and there's a language of flow between all of those parts. And there's different forms of communication. That an ecology is always sending information, and so we currently have information silos where all of our data is kept in these centralized databases that we don't have access to. But blockchain enables us to have open-ended data structures that allow us to connect and interoperate different types of information and value. And lastly, there's this dynamic intersection in bioregional context between autonomy and interdependence. There's that autonomy piece saying that we actually have the right as citizens of Earth to self-organize, and we don't need to wait for any institutional permission to do that. And there's a fundamentally relational quality to the work that we're here to do. And so I believe that as a technology, there's actually a deep values alignment between distributed tools and the ethos of a more life affirming or life centric design philosophy. And the point of all of this is because our current economic and financial systems are profoundly misaligned with life, which I don't need to explain very much to anyone here. But I think that it's the great design challenge of our lifetimes to reimagine our entire financial system according to these life-centered principles, which I think why many of us are here. And so I recently published an essay called Beyond Narrow Optimization, and I'm trying to articulate a way in which we could actually harmonize the different signals and value flows within our economy with living systems principles. Because I think a major, one of the kind of big picture systemic drivers of ecocide is narrow optimization. We're only optimizing for profit, which means extraction, which means that our economic system is inherently destructive to life. And so, what would a system that is actually optimized for the holistic and pluralistic definitions of well-being and quality of life? And I believe that the blockchain technology enables us to design those economic primitives. I see it as a canvas for this open-ended economic design process, where we've kind of inherited these institutional economic structures that we sometimes feel powerless to change. And yet these tools enable us to create expressions of value through tokens. and also to have democratic decision making embedded at all of the different scales of our economic system. And so I wanted to start off by just sharing a little bit of that kind of background of why I think blockchain technology is actually not a scary thing as it's been made out to be. There are certainly very unhealthy parts of the ecosystem, but I wanted to start with that because I think we're trying to create a canvas, and this technology is a foundation or a substrate upon which we can design life affirming systems. And the way that I'm trying to articulate this is as a pattern language, because I think it's really important as citizens of the world to know the grammar of how to design our own economic systems, so that we're not powerless waiting for someone else to come up with an economy that works for life, but we actually feel empowered to take those tools into our own hands and create our own economic systems. And so I'm trying to distill down these kind of fundamental root building blocks so that every person can say, "Oh yeah, I can create a capital pool, and I know how that pool is governed." And I'm imagining capital pools are groups of allocators, which can be computers or human beings, who utilize signals to allocate resources into streams of value, and that these streams create outcomes which are measured as signals, which inform future allocations, which are reported as impact or return. And so this is just a way of thinking about how capital is formed and governed, and describing it in a language that allows us to, almost like a paintbrush, to paint a grants program, a bond system, a currency model that meets the needs that we're trying to achieve. And that those streams, once they're allocated, are bidirectional flows of value. When you're allocating a resource, there's some intent that you're embedding into that resource. And it's not just financial return, but there's some outcome, and your ability to correlate the way that the resource is being allocated with the outcome that you're trying to achieve. It should be a feedback loop process where you're consistently iterating and learning how to more effectively allocate resources to create the more holistic outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And so instead of just talking about this in the abstract, we wanted to go through a series of case studies, um, mostly to inspire and empower you to start thinking about how you can begin to design these mechanisms yourself. Because Allo is intended to be a kind of back end support structure for the kinds of bioregional infrastructure that all of you are creating. We want to be in a partnership with all of you to design these instruments and infrastructures together. And so we want to provide a little bit of like a deep dive into some of the tools that are in the toolkit, so that we can start having conversations about how we build them together.
All right. Thanks, Benjamin. So, how many people in the audience have heard of DAOs? Okay, about half of us. You can kind of think of DAOs as just organizations that are built on blockchains. So, basically, when you're thinking about resource allocation, imagine that we could go outside of a standard corporation as we know it today, which means outside of the design space of having a CEO with a hierarchy and a fiduciary duty to shareholders to maximize shareholder value, e.g., profit, e.g., extraction. What if we could design organizations that have distributed decision making, that push power to the edges, that give you an owner just by being a member of a network? Have a shared treasury insofar as we could have a Cascadia bioregion DAO or series of DAOs and subsidiary DAOs that all share treasury with each other, and resources just flow emergently through the network. And so I think that the really exciting thing to me about DAOs is, what if we could create 21st century organizations? And in a way, organizations is actually even a misnomer for what we're trying to create. We're trying to create networks through which resources can flow, and that we can solve multipolar traps and principal agent problems. Those are just fancy game theory words for how can we align our incentives with each other and all coordinate around bioregions. DAOs are sort of the design space, the canvas, the primitives that we'll be able to put together and to build on-chain organizations or networks that are configurable and give people a share without intermediaries in between us and the value flows that we need to regenerate our bioregions. So that's the hope for DAOs. And it's a very wide design space. And we're going to talk about a couple of specific DAOs in these case studies as we continue. And the one that I think that I'm qualified to talk about is Gitcoin, because I founded Gitcoin back in 2017. Thank you. It's a place that you can get coins if you're an open source software developer. And we're known primarily for a mechanism called Quadratic Funding. Basically, we put out a pool of money every quarter or every other quarter, about $1 million. And basically, we match contributions to great open source projects in the Ethereum ecosystem, but also increasingly traditional open source as well. And basically, the gimmick, the one weird trick that makes this thing work, is that we match contributions from the crowd not on the basis of the dollar amount put into the projects, but the breadth of contributors to the projects. Okay, so basically, if Project A gets $100 from 100 contributors and Project B gets $100 from one contributor, that first project is going to get like 95% of the matching pool because it's got such a breadth of support to its constituents. And this is kind of like an example of the power of on-chain primitives of crypto. We can program our values into our money, and we value broad democratic support for specific public goods and for specific things. And so Gitcoin has sort of like proven out that we can fund open source and public goods in the Ethereum ecosystem by creating this Schelling point for funding what matters in the Ethereum ecosystem in 2025. And I want to be very clear. I'm proud of what we've done with Gitcoin. We funded $70 million of open source software. Thank you. But, and the big but is that open source software creates $500 billion per year in economic value. So we have like 1,000x growth ahead of us if we really, truly want to be funding what matters to open source software developers. And go ahead, Benjamin.
Well, I just want to tag on to, as someone who started as a Gitcoin grantee, the first money that my other project, Open Civics, ever received was through Gitcoin. And then we raised a matching pool to distribute as a community round. And so the beautiful thing that Gitcoin has evolved from open source software funding to funding a whole series of public goods, including climate change and including bioregionalism. There's a flow where grantees can become grantors, and those rounds can start to cascade. And so we're already seeing this kind of proto flow funding model develop where Regenerate Cascadia was part of the BioFi Pathfinders round on Gitcoin. And that community round received $50,000 in matching funds from Gitcoin on top of funds that they had already received. And then Regenerate Cascadia is now regranting those funds to local projects within Cascadia. And so Quadratic funding is one mechanism, but Gitcoin has also evolved to be many multi-mechanism, one of which is metrics-based funding, where as a voter, I can determine what percentage of different metrics I value. And then projects that have attestations around those metrics, it's a lot easier to do with software, like how many contributors it has, how many times people have downloaded the software. But what I imagine is that as we start to have more metrics for bioregional regeneration on chain, we can start to allocate resources to the projects that are actually creating that impact, and to, instead of voting for the project we like, vote for which metrics we think are valuable, and then it autonomously distributes those resources to the projects creating that impact. So Gitcoin has evolved from just funding open source software to now funding many different types of public goods in many more mechanisms than just Quadratic funding.
Yeah, thanks. The last thing I'll say before I hand it off to you, Benjamin, is that in GG23, which is our 23rd matching campaign that we did a month ago, we started to not just fund open source software projects, but we're now funding what we call Ethereum localism. So basically, how can we pour money from these crypto projects that are desperate for adoption and legitimacy, but have big treasuries, down to local cities and bioregions that want to see activations in their local community. And so we've had Quadratic funding rounds in Central America and in Europe and in parts of Asia, that Gitcoin is kind of becoming this cosmo-local funding layer that's taking money and channeling it into these local communities. And the idea is to show off that it's not all rugs and scams and that we can do good things with crypto. So That's the goal with Gitcoin, and I think Ethereum localism is and bioregional funding is going to be a future of what we do in GG24, which is coming up in the fall. So I'll hand it back to you, Benjamin. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, round of applause for Gitcoin. Um, the next case study we want to share is the Common Impact Data Standard. This has been emerging within the Web3 world because it's an open-ended way of looking at impact reporting. There's so many different schemas and ways that impact can be documented and shared. And so what this framework attempts to do is to create a machine readable language that can be modified. I won't go into all of the technical details of how it works, but basically, any impact that's being created, we can come to a consensus around some of the ways in which we describe that impact, but in an open ended way. So, if you are planting trees, you can measure the age of the tree, you can measure soil health, you can measure the bioacoustic data from the forest that is being regenerated. And all of that impact data can be correlated in a machine readable way so that when you receive a grant and then you create that impact, you can immediately tie the data from the grant that you received to the impact that you created. And this is a really powerful tool because it makes the impact that we're creating interoperable and allows for us to not say to grantees, you have to report impact in the way that we've determined, but gives them an open-ended framework to be able to describe the impact that they're creating in a way that can then be bundled and tokenized and rewarded after the fact through retroactive public goods funding. And then I want to give a special shout out to Regen Foundation. I know Austin is here. And I wanted to bring forward their work as a really important case study for particularly the verification layer, because I was super impressed with a case study they did in Dar es Salaam around community-led verification. I think this is a really important tool in our toolkit because there's such a tremendous industry around impact measurement and verification that there's a couple of big players in the space, and we rely on these very centralized entities to do this almost impossible task of validating the different impact claims that are being generated on the ground. And so what Regen Foundation did in this case study in Dar es Salaam was using DAOs as a way to directly empower the people who are creating the impact to evaluate the impact together. And I think this is a really powerful tool because instead of having bloated centralized entities that are evaluating impact, we can actually do this also in a participatory and open-ended way. And lastly, I want to ground us in a case study around something I think a lot of us have been talking about, and I think there's so many amazing conversations and presentations about bioregional flow funding. I think I'm really excited that this is such a hot topic here. And the way that I have been imagining bioregional flow funding through conversations with Regenerate Cascadia, this idea of fractal flow funding or federated flow funding, to have pools and streams of capital that are able to cascade from the bioregional scale all the way down to the landscape scale, and using this participatory democratic process to identify what the whole system's regeneration strategies are locally on the ground, and then use the bioregional backbone nonprofit organization like Regenerate Cascadia. I think this is a great pattern for other bioregions as well, to have, or like Salmon Nation, to have an organization that's helping to cohere and coordinate the work that's happening autonomously locally, and to be able to synthesize the outcomes that those local teams are trying to achieve, and to create ways of documenting the impact that's happening, so that the resources can flow democratically from the bioregional scale down to the local scale in a coherent and kind of fractalized way. And I believe that we can do this with a combination of distributed decision making and tokenization and on-chain impact reporting. I think all of these are tools that can be combined into creating this bioregional flow funding infrastructure that we've all been talking about. And so the reason we wanted to go over all of those different possible mechanisms to show you that there's a lot of tools that we have in our tool belt that we can start to piece together. And as I mentioned before about Gitcoin, the BioFi Pathfinders round was an initial experiment that has led into additional experiments. And so we want to encourage everyone to consider running around, consider putting together a matching pool and reaching out to projects that you think would be a fit to participate, and to use that as a capacity building process to normalize this process of democratic decision making for resource allocation, and to start familiarizing ourselves with these tools because I think they can be incredibly powerful. Launch an on-chain BFF.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having us. Come talk to us if you want to help. If you want help allocating your capital, we'd love to launch an on-chain BFF with you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Do we have time for a question or two? Yeah.
I thought we were out of time. Okay.
Yeah.
So I perceive a lot of the difficulties that trying to promote us the currencies.
To try to bring about cryptocurrencies in communities is the expectation that individuals in the community will be the initial users of the currency. And if I've understood correctly, you've moved up the chain a little bit to get um, uh, people who are already somewhat knowledgeable about cryptocurrencies to be engaged. And would that include, like, would a foundation put money into a crypto, an allo chain? Allo.
Yeah. So I think that on-chain primitives are associated with the creation of new currencies because a lot of people are using crypto for that. Most of the experiments that we do are just using stable coins or ETH. So there's no new currency that's introduced into these things. And our experience is that people just want to pay for things in US dollars. And so an increasing trend that we're seeing in the space is what I call the blockchain mullet, where it just feels like the regular system in the front and it's crypto in the back. And so, you can hide all that stuff in the back, but there are powerful attributes of community currencies, but it requires a lot more legitimacy and buy-in around why that community currency actually has value and why that value would be stable. Anything to add there, Benjamin?
Yes. So one project that I love to share about is called Big Green DAO. And their model as a re-granting organization is each grantee becomes a voter in the DAO, making decisions about where the next round of funding should go. And so that's a traditional foundation that's using a DAO as a mechanism to include participatory democracy for their grantees. Um, and then we've also developed a tool called Allo IRL, which is a grant round interface that doesn't require crypto at all. It distributes crypto to the grantees, but it's intended to be used at events. And so we did the first pilot of it during this Ethereum localism event we hosted in Boulder this past winter. And we were able to give away $10,000 to local mutual aid groups based on the democratic decision making of all the attendees in the event. And it was, we basically just got the email list from our Luma or our events platform. We put them on a special allow list so anyone could log in with their email if they were on the list. And then as soon as they log in, they get 100 voting credits and they can allocate those 100 voting credits to any of the projects that are presenting. And it uses a similar algorithm to the one Kevin explained for Quadratic funding, where each credit that you allocate is slightly less valuable than the previous credit. And that's designed to help the system identify which projects have the broadest base of support. So the same kind of logic for a crowdfunding purpose with voting tokens instead of dollars. And so we're trying to build tools that do not require people to know about or use crypto at all. But we believe that the back end for the resilience of the system, as well as the affordances that we described about like the things that uniquely blockchains are capable of, that we want to retain those capacities without requiring people to learn a whole new stack of technologies. And so we're trying to build interfaces that support that kind of user experience. Yeah. Maybe one more question?
So I'm very new at this, but I wondered if you can track qualitative impact because you were mentioning more quantitative impact. And so that's my question.
Yeah, so there's a tool called the Ethereum Attestation Service. And attestation is basically a claim that you're making. And so being able to have impact claims that don't necessarily have quantitative data associated with them, but it still lets you have a unit of measurement that that thing occurred. And then that can become a form of reputation. We've started to have a requirement for our grantees that they have at least one attestation that someone else has verified to progress from one grant round to the next. And so it's a really simple, transparent accountability measure, even though it's not something that we're trying to quantify per se. And so this just allows us to create discrete units of any sort of claim of impact, and that allows us to not have to rely on exclusively quantitative information.
More questions?
So maybe one more? Yeah.
So my question is about, so let's say, there's a grassroots organization who wants to access these tools and they don't have the capacity or the technological know-how to do that. What would be the best way for them to get started with this?
Yeah, so I think that we're in a place right now where we're really this space is very much wet clay. And I think that myself and Benjamin and the engineers that we surround ourselves with are sort of shaping that into product experiences that just everyday people can use. And then the goal will be to make those self-serve eventually. Until then, just contact myself or Benjamin, Kevin at Allo.Capital, Benjamin at Allo.Capital, and we'd love to help you out. And yeah, the goal is to make them self-service and easy to spin up one day. But for now, just come talk to us.
Yeah, and I would say participate in a Gitcoin round is a really great way to get involved in this community. There's a spirit of radical positivity and abundance within the Gitcoin world, where people are eager to help educate and support new grantees. And then I would also say becoming a member of Open Civics, the DAO that I helped to co-found, it's intended to be a space where grassroots community organizations and Web3 technologists are able to support each other. So both of those are communities and ecosystems where just by participating, you're going to meet people who are eager to support the work that you're doing.
Sorry, I came in late, so I don't know if I missed this, but Regenerate Cascadia participated in the BioFi round. Did you talk about? Oh, you did. Okay. I wanted to just say what an amazing experience it was for Have you spoken about this? No. Oh, okay. What an amazing experience it was for Regenerate Cascadia, because there's something about actually doing the work that of just having to get everything in, to get the material that just shares what the vision is. And then the way that you did the Quadratic funding was really amazing, and just how we then connected to a whole bunch of other projects that we didn't know about. I just wanted to share that because it was very positive, and also a huge shout out to you because, boy, you did an amazing job.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, and huge shout out to Samantha Power from the BioFi project for reaching out to Kevin and Kevin helping to bring the matching funding in. And it was really this coalition of organizations that came together to make that round possible. The Design School for Regenerating Earth, Regen Coordination, Cello Public Goods, all came together. And I think that was one of the main points that I don't think I hit fully, was that I believe that the coordination that happens through resource distribution is a movement building strategy. And when we align through these democratic processes, we're not competing with each other. We're saying we want the collective to determine what the allocation is, and we're aligned that we want to pool capital together for this shared purpose and outcome. And so I think it's a way to help to catalyze this collaboration both at the local and at the global level, through mechanisms that support that kind of non-rivalrous behavior.
Thank you. I think just trying to maybe ground this, or to people who are laymen here and myself included, to have some hope in this. Think about the model of a co-op, one person, one vote. When you look at digital platforms like cryptocurrency, it tends to be more money, more votes. So I'm curious. It sounds like you're changing some of those models. Curious if you're seeing examples of co-op behavior on chain.
Yeah, I sometimes describe decentralized autonomous organizations as cooperatives for the internet age, because in some you do need to pay to vote, and we're seeing some really, it's like they're fast running the path to authoritarianism. Like great, wow, this industry has only existed for 2 years, and it already has the worst corruption of all of our democratic institutions that took 200 years to collapse. But the last bullet point on that slide was configurable governance logic, which is quite a nerdy term, but that basically means that you can design it to be governed however you want. And so our DAO is one person, one vote. And our consultancy is a cooperative that's registered as a cooperative, but it also happens to be a decentralized organization. And there's actually now legal frameworks that allow you to incorporate cooperatives as DAOs as cooperatives in several states. And so I would say it's up to you to design it how to fit the needs of your organizational model, but that these are building blocks that allow you to create any kind of organization you can imagine. It's great for sociocracy. We use sociocracy as our main governance structure. And you can also have reputation weighted voting where, let's say for some decisions, you want it to be based on how much reputation you've earned. That doesn't always work, but you can create reputation systems where as people contribute, they earn more voice. But that's up to you. You can design it however you want.
Thanks, y'all. This has been fun.
Thank you.
Again, thank you for listening. We are featuring the people who are building the capital allocation layer of the next generation of the internet. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.